Okay, hi everybody. Thank you all for joining us for our second installment of the Nash Talks Optimizing the Home Office webinar series. This is a three-part series in which we are garnering the expertise of professionals who have successfully made the experience of working from home more efficient, satisfying, and safe. If you joined us for last week's webinar, you would have heard Ben Foster telling us about cyber criminality during lockdown and how to keep your sensitive data secure while working from home. This week, we're thrilled to have people development specialist Brittney Leibert from Rapid7 in Boston talking to us. Brittney was instrumental in the creation and global rollout of Rapid7's new remote onboarding strategy. Excuse me. She will be telling us a little bit about their remote onboarding strategy with a particular focus on how Rapid7 are fostering cultures and connections remotely. There'll be time for a few questions at the very end, but please feel free to send any you may have in during the presentation. And now I'll pass over to you, Brittney.
Hi, thank you, Kevin. Very glad to be here and super excited to see people dialing in. I know Zoom fatigue is real and has definitely set in by this time in quarantine. So thank you so much for being here as well. Oh, there's one more thing I was going to say, and this is a very bad start. Hold on one sec. I'll share my screen and it'll come back to me. All right, sorry for the awkward start there, everyone. All right, let's just go ahead and dive right into it. So really excited to be here on behalf of Rapid7 to share more about how we have made sure that we've maintained an emphasis on our culture and helping new hires foster connections with one another, with their teams, and with others at Rapid7 while we've been onboarding remotely. My name is Brittney Leibert, like I said, and I'm part of the people development team at Rapid7. Rapid7 is a cybersecurity company based in Boston. So that's usually where you can find me, but we also have offices throughout North America. We have offices in APAC, and we have a few offices in EMEA, including an office in Dublin. We're nearly 2,000 employees strong. I've been at Rapid7 for about 4 years, and it has more than doubled in that time. And like I said, we're a cybersecurity organization. We're not the organization that the last speaker came from last week, but we do provide a number of products and services to our customers, as well as conduct research and make those findings available to the broader security community. My role within Rapid7 is on our people development team. And so our goal as a team more broadly is to enable continuous learning and skills building and career development around the organization. My role in particular, my area of specialty is on new hire onboarding. So I have the privilege of greeting every single one of our new hires who comes into Rapid7 as part of our onboarding program, which we call, and I know this is a little bit lofty here, Making the Band Rapid7's new Moose experience. So this requires a little bit of explanation because there's two competing themes that you'll find at Rapid7. Number one, we have a more conventional sort of corporate theme, this idea being that we hire rock stars, that we help them build rock star careers, and that everyone who comes in joins or is part of a band as their team. And so this is an image from our Boston office headquarters of Freddie Mercury, representative of that theme, but you'll find that in a number of other places throughout Rapid7 if you're an employee there. But at the same time, you'll see this new Moose language. The Moose, I know this is a very North American thing, but likewise, if you go into any of our Rapid7 offices, Moose will be front and center. And the meaning behind Moose is sort of twofold. So we refer to ourselves as Moose. It's sort of embraced as a mascot at Rapid7. And the idea here is that the singular version of Moose is Moose, and the plural is also Moose. And in that way, we are all one Moose, which can sound a little culty and isn't meant to mean that we don't have our own individual identities, but more to say that the success or failure of any one person is that of the entire team behind them, or we don't exist in a silo or in a vacuum. So I might refer to my new hires as new Moose throughout this presentation, and this is exactly why. And one thing that you should know that's really important about our onboarding program and about our people development team at Rapid7 is that live training is really important to us. So we are led by a former public school teacher. every single new hire that comes into Rapid7, if they're not based in our Boston office or our largest EMEA office, which is Belfast, they get flown into one of those offices. So they have an opportunity to meet with our co-trainers, with other new hires, and with other Rapid7 employees in some of those larger offices face-to-face. So pre-quarantine, everyone was regularly flying into the offices. We were running those almost every other week out of our Boston office and a few times a year out of our Belfast office. And as you can see, we used VR headsets in our training. A lot of our training relied on really active exercises within our training room. And although we do have a significant employee population that is based remotely permanently, they're regularly working from home pre-quarantine, every single new hire that started who is going to be based remotely would start in a physical office. We would fly them out. So in other words, the face-to-face component of our program was really, really important. And so it required a lot of logistical shifts when we made this move to quarantined life for all of our employees. And that was true for all of our programs, right? So there are a lot of logistical challenges around, of course, how do we get laptops to new hires? How do we make sure it's going to the right address because people are perhaps moving or spending quarantine with their parents or what have you? How do we deliver what have been live in-person trainings in a digital format, recognizing we can't send everyone a VR headset, for example? So there are obviously a lot of logistical shifts that needed to happen. But today I'm really going to focus on how we infused this shift with a lot of empathy and perspective taking for our new hires so that we can make sure that some of the intangible things, right, beyond the logistics, were still being accounted for in our remote onboarding experience. So we thought about what our new hires might lose out on by onboarding or starting remotely. And so you can see some of those examples here, but essentially what it boiled down to, or what we realized we needed to be really intentional about including in our onboarding program remotely is, number one, helping our new hires build connections, and number two, making sure that they had opportunities to witness our culture, to embody our core values, and to find opportunities to really engage with them, right? To make mistakes, to learn from them, to really put those core values into practice. And if we think about that a little bit more deeply, our goal is to help new hires meaningfully connect, not just with one another, but also with their managers and team members, recognizing that they're really losing the benefit of their manager being right there to see if they need support, or maybe they've worked through something really quickly. They don't have their team members that they can turn to really easily for questions. So how do we facilitate that as a people development team? And then how do we help them connect with others at Rapid7 as well? And then in terms of culture, of course, we try to hire people who we consider a culture fit, who naturally embody our set of core values that are core to how we operate and hire and build at Rapid7. But we also wanted to enable them to elevate our culture. We have this idea at Rapid7 that we don't just hire culture fits, but culture contributors, people who can, like I said, elevate or contribute back to our culture by feeling really confident in their ability to recognize and provide kudos for and themselves embody our set of core values. So I'll start with how we went about facilitating some of those connections and making sure that that piece wasn't lost in the remote setting. So you'll see a number of strategies here, and I'll give you an example of what each of these really looked like. But our first step, one of the first decisions that we made as we moved into the remote setting was to centralize our first day orientation. So what I mean by this is that every single new hire starting in their own respective offices would have an orientation with the IT team for their IT and laptop setup. They would have an orientation with their office manager or myself in Boston. And this is essentially an overview of what to expect from the program. It helps them make some connections with other new hires, and it gives them some of the logistical housekeeping need to know information about their onboarding experience in their first few days. And then of course, they'd also have an office tour. So a really nice space to just work out some of the first day jitters with people who are experiencing the same thing. But of course, each of these things was happening in their own respective offices. So as we made the shift to remote start, one of the first ideas that we had was that we should centralize this. Instead of having different office managers running this concurrently, instead we could consolidate this and have all of our new hires starting remotely in the same call. So this is just a very, very simple shift that we made, but we wanted to emphasize for them, or we wanted to give them the space rather to make some of those connections with other new hires who wouldn't be in the same office as they would usually. And in that first day orientation call, I cover a lot of the things that we've already covered, what we do as an organization in terms of our products and services and our core values, as well as our Moose theme and Rockstar theme and so on, and some of the things they can expect there. And then an opportunity for just an initial connection with other new hires. Of course, we're operating within a number of different time zones at Rapid7, and people might have questions before they actually get started. So we also invited all of our new hires to join a pre-day one Slack channel using their personal email addresses. So this was a pretty simple thing to set up for us as well that really enabled new hires to connect with each other before they got started so that when they did attend that orientation, they would have some faces to put to names. And this was also a good space for us to share out some resources that people could take advantage of or take a look at before dialing into that first day orientation, recognizing that we have some people in later time zones or earlier time zones than others, and we don't want to leave them kind of sitting, waiting around for that orientation to start without something to do or something in front of them. So you don't have to read through this whole thing, but that's really just to say that we use this not only for those new hire connections, but also to communicate some key information to them before they started as well. And then it was also super important to us that we emphasize the manager's role in all of this. Because obviously managers are experiencing their own set of challenges by making this remote shift. And so we put together a really comprehensive checklist of items that a manager should be keeping in mind or doing as their new hires start date approaches, on their new hires first day, and in the weeks following. And so this is just an excerpt of that manager checklist about onboarding their new hires remotely. But we tried to include things that would ensure that managers are empathizing with their new hires experience, right? So it's even something as simple as making sure there's always a Zoom link, right? Getting in the habit of that, making sure that your new hire is comfortable using tools that maybe we've begun to take for granted that not everybody knows how to use. And we tried to emphasize as well the importance of scheduling some meetings for your incoming new hire so that they can make some of those connections with people who are most important to them, right? Our team can help facilitate a number of random connections around the organization, but we really wanted to put the onus and responsibility on the managers who have a better sense of who they should be meeting with within their first few weeks. We also wanted to give new hires an opportunity to connect a little bit more meaningfully with one another. So although they'll meet other new hires during that first day orientation call, we also use a tool that automates a connection between one new hire and another new hire who started on the same week as them. And this is something that, although we have a dedicated tool for it, as you can see here, I think at a low volume of new hires and for a short period of time, which will hopefully be the case for the rest of quarantine, I think this is something that could really easily be manually replicated. But as you can see here, this essentially just pairs up two new hires to schedule 30 minutes to grab a coffee over Zoom or to just have a more personal connection and get to know each other a little bit more deeply. At Rapid7, we refer to this as Insight Coffee. This is essentially just a program that formalizes and incentivizes new hires and other employees to just make personal, informal connections. And because we've gotten a little bit larger, we've just added some more structure to that process. But this is one way, or one program rather, that we've leveraged to ensure that new hires don't just feel a good connection to their manager and team, but also to other new hires that they're joining with. And then lastly, we still invite all of our new hires to attend that 2-day live training, but of course we had to shift it to a virtual setting. So we use Zoom really heavily, so I'm going to refer to Zoom language here. But essentially, I shifted my focus quite a bit to rely on how we could make all of our exercises and activities more small group focused. Or in other words, how can I encourage facilitate some of those personal connections in those small group breakout rooms, and just stop talking at people. That was some of the feedback that I got initially, was that folks felt like we were spending a lot of time debriefing, and that the conversations were being dominated by just a couple of people, which sometimes tends to happen in a setting like this, where it's a little less comfortable to share out. And so I tried to facilitate as many opportunities as possible for every single person to contribute their ideas and thoughts. So I relied a lot on small group activities, and I still do when our new hires attend that 2-day live training. And there are a couple of additional ways beyond just the exercises themselves that have tried to encourage people or give people the space to get to know each other a little bit more personally. So number one is what you'll see on this market challenges jigsaw slide. So this is just a piece of our 2-day session. So it's just, that's the context for it. But essentially, as you can see there, there's this group leader at the top of the slide. So this might not make a ton of sense, but I'll give some explanation. So every time I send people into a small breakout room for a group activity, I have them designate or find a group leader. That's going to be the person who helps move the conversation along, who shares their screen if there's a worksheet to complete, and who will share on behalf of the team in our full group debrief afterwards. And this is difficult to identify even when you're live in the room, and especially difficult to identify naturally when you're in a Zoom room. So for every single activity, I just pick a random characteristic that will define who is going to be the group leader. So for example, in this one, this encourages everyone to share out their pet's name, and then the person whose pet's name is first alphabetically is going to be the group leader. So not critical to the activity, not critical to your knowledge of who you're working with at Rapid7, but it is a really nice way and a really simple way to just sort of break the ice and ease some of the tension that's associated with engaging in a group activity with virtual strangers. So other things you can use are as simple as the person whose birthday is coming up the soonest, or the person who has the most unique or interesting shirt. Like, it could really be anything. And it just kicks off that segment with a little bit more of a personal note, something people can get excited about or interested in about others. And then the other thing that I like to do here is, although I emphasize in my 2-day live training that people should step away from the screen as much as they can, if they do want to hang around for our various breaks throughout the day, I'll always have a new topic of conversation, and then something that I encourage them to do with that 10 or 15 or 30-minute break. So as you can see here, your favorite book, movie, TV show, or podcast, it varies from session to session if people actually hang around for this, but it is nice to just have this dedicated space so people feel comfortable using the break time to get to know each other in that way as well. So those are just a few of the strategies that we employed for ensuring that people could build some of those less professional, more personal connections, and some of those more meaningful work connections as well. But we also focused on how we could help our new hires not just understand what our core values are, but feel empowered to identify and recognize and reward others embodying those core values, and likewise feel invited to share their unique backgrounds and skills and ideas, especially in this setting, again, where you don't have the benefit of just turning to someone, showing them a prototype or asking them questions as easily. So how could we, or what role could we play in making sure that our culture is sort of maintained and fostered and elevated by our new hires? And so we employed a few strategies here as well. Some of these are going to feel really Rapid7 specific, but I think that they could be replicated in a lot of different organizations as well, and I'll let you know how. Obviously, the office tour is not the most critical cultural component of a new hire's first day or of their start, but it does get them really excited. It is nice to see kind of your new digs. You walk around the office at Rapid7, you see a bunch of moose. You can see some of the collaborations in action. You can see the different spaces that you might be working in the future. We were really fortunate because we had already recorded, or had our office managers record, a number of walk around office tours for their respective offices. So we had this graphic already sort of pre-built so folks could take a look, not just at their own office and what to expect when they get back into it, but also at other offices as well, just to see some of the geographic differences or regional differences too. And as we're starting to, or as a lot of companies are starting to allow small groups of employees into the offices, I think this is something that could be done really, really simply, recognizing that you might still have new hires in the future who will be starting and onboarding remotely for quite a while. So this is as simple as just taking a phone and just walking around and sort of recording the office. And I think it's something that new hires have really appreciated, seeing as many of them now at this point as they're starting have never seen the office. We also wanted to make sure that we were giving people something to be excited about when they got started on their first day. We know that swag is not like the most important component of a new hire's onboarding experience, but people do get excited about it. There's something really nice about walking up to your desk and you have a bunch of stuff on it. And obviously we weren't able to do that because we couldn't physically get that to folks anymore. So what we've replaced that with temporarily before we can get into the offices and ship everyone a little swag package is that we asked our leadership team for a number of book recommendations, and we provide every single new hire with a Kindle e-gift card so that they can use that money or use that gift card to purchase one of those books perhaps, or just purchase something that's going to help them feel empowered or excited or ready to get started at Rapid7, or that will help them be more effective during their time here. And so this is also a really nice introduction to them of our leadership team, some of the things that are most important to them and that they value, and some advice that they might give to our new hires. And this gives them something to do, like I said earlier, if they're waiting on that first day to dial into their IT and onboarding overview. This is one nice way that they can kind of get excited in lieu of swag until we can get back into the offices. And then this piece is really Rapid7 specific. So the stuff on the right, I'll try to explain the best I can without going into too much Rapid7 detail. But essentially, we wanted to think about what shifts we needed to make, not just to logistics, but to our content, right? It wasn't as simple as just saying we need to take a live training and put it into a digital format. We really needed to ensure that the content was aligned with the new and unique needs of new hires starting remotely. And so we recognize, like I said earlier, that one of these was how we help our people understand and embrace and add to our culture. One of the things that is really key and central to our culture is, of course, our set of core values. So you can see some of those named here. I won't go into them in detail. You probably, or you likely have a set of your own values as an organization. And so you probably understand how important these are to the way that we hire and build and develop at Rapid7. But essentially, we put a bigger emphasis on, number one, what our core values are. Number two, how we can recognize others for embodying the core values. And then number three, how can we embody them a little bit more tactically and concretely within our own roles. So in our new hire training, in that 2-day live training rather, I have carved out a significant amount of time to, number one, what our core values are and what they look like in action, or how you might recognize when someone else is embodying that core value. So we have a tool already pre-built within Rapid7, which is really convenient, that allows us to give kudos to someone who's done something awesome, and it allows us to identify which core value is reflected in what we had to say about that person. And then a big shift or a big area of focus that we added to our 2-day live training online is this design thinking approach to solving customer challenges. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what core values are incorporated in that process and really giving our new hires the time to experiment with some of those ideas and prototypes that they have for solving those customer challenges that they identify. And again, this is really Rapid7 specific. Your own learners, your own new hires will have a very different set of needs, but we really wanted to focus on making sure that we were addressing the new needs of our learners instead of just focusing on the logistics of shifting it to an online setting. And of course, like I said, we really took an emphasis, or wanted to maintain an emphasis, on empathizing with our new hires. And so this is just a simple philosophy, a tweet that I saw quite a while back at the start of quarantine that we've tried to embrace in all of our programs, really making sure that we remind our new hires that they don't we don't expect them to be like fully engaged in our 2-day live Zoom training. We know that they have other responsibilities. We know that this might not feel like their number one priority. If there's anything that they need to take in terms of time or space or whatever it is, they're more than encouraged to do so, and we can catch them up on anything that they missed later, right? So just setting some of those expectations and setting that tone, because that's aligned with our broader culture as an organization as well. We also encourage them to, because they're not getting the benefit of seeing when their team usually comes in or leaves for the day, they're not learning some of those team norms. We encourage them to really establish with their manager a time for them to shut off, because it can be really easy within the first couple of weeks to just work, especially when you don't have that delineation between the workday and the end of the workday and sort of your evening. And so we try to encourage that as well for our new hires. I'm keeping an eye on time and trying to go quickly here so we have time for some questions. But those are some of the strategies that we employ to just make sure that we were communicating to our new hires what our culture is and giving them opportunities to really meaningfully engage with it. And the results have been good. The outcomes so far have been promising. We've made shifts throughout that I think have improved these scores over time, but you can see here the percent of new hires on the left-hand side who agreed with the statement on the right-hand side. This is just a sampling of the data that we collect from a number of different sources. But as you can see, these data points here just really suggest that managers are doing a good job of welcoming and engaging their new hires even in this remote setting, that their first day feels meaningful to them and sets them up for success moving forward, and that 2-day live training really is helping them create or make meaningful connections with other new hires as well. So thank you for listening. Like I said, I don't love to talk at my new hires, so it's a little unnatural for me to just talk at you. If you'd like to connect for any follow-up questions or conversation or anything like that, please feel free to reach me at the addresses below. And with that, Kevin, I'll let me know if there's any questions and I can try to quickly answer them.
Yeah, thanks a million, Brittney. That was absolutely brilliant. We already enjoyed that, I think. And there's a few questions that come in here while you were speaking. So the first one I've got here is this process unfolded really quickly. Were there any things you tried at the beginning that didn't work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'll share one example just in the interest of time. But in terms of that 2-day live training, I think we have really changed the way that we initially approached it. So the 2-day live training, we tried to incorporate like every technology in the book. We wanted it to be super engaging. We recognized that, or we hypothesized that if people were in Zoom just looking at me talk and maybe moving into some of those smaller breakout rooms, that they might get a little bit bored because they're just using the same technology. So we're using Slack channels, we're using Zoom, we're using tools like Padlet and other collaborative external tools. We were using like a workbook in Google Docs, and we were having them engage with just a number of disparate tools. And what we found, or what we realized, was that that is a lot of cognitive overload for folks to have to learn these new tools in addition to learning the new content. And so we really scaled it down to just live in a couple of technologies. So as much as we could reduce the cognitive load on our new hires, we did. And that was a major shift from the first run of the session, in which we were using as many technologies as we could think of to try to really engage folks in that way. But again, we kind of found that that was just the wrong approach. It was actually the opposite approach that we should have been taking from the start. Does that help answer that question? I know that's a little bit.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So another one that came in, Brittney, is on average, how many people were you onboarding remotely within the same cohorts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it varies week to week. For example, we have a rotation program of college graduates that's starting in a couple of weeks. So I'll have 28 in a week, which is unusual. That's definitely on the high end. Typically, we have at least 2 a week. I would say the average is around 5 to 7. Our hiring slowed down a little bit as we figured out our approach to hiring and onboarding remotely at the start of quarantine, but now it's gotten up to about pre-quarantine levels or around that range.
Okay, good stuff. We won't stick around. There's a few questions here, but I'm very conscious of time here. What have been the biggest challenges for you, Brittney, with the remote onboarding process?
Yeah, it's a good question. Trying to think of the best way to concisely answer this. Hmm. I feel like perhaps one of the biggest challenges was all of the coordination, or continues to be all of the coordination with a number of different teams. So making sure that our IT team and IT techs can get equipment built in time, making sure that we communicate to our TA team how important it is to get people hired in as quickly as possible and with more notice than we would usually need, recognizing that IT would need to order that equipment, send the equipment out in well enough time for it to actually get to where it needs to go. I think another challenge is we wanted to make sure that we could have people start, or that we can have people dial into that central orientation. But what that meant, like I said earlier, is that we had people calling in from different time zones and things like that. And so it's difficult to think of, or it was initially a challenge to think of how we could meaningfully populate that time. I think another challenge is that we didn't expect this to go on as long as it has. Originally, we thought this was going to be like a 2-week thing, which is a very American response to things. But essentially what that meant is that we put a lot of like Band-Aid or patchwork solutions in at first, changes to communications and things like that, and then have had to really formalize and make those more scalable, which we didn't anticipate at first. So we definitely had to make a few more permanent changes that we weren't anticipating. And so there's kind of been 2 phases of our approach to remote onboarding. Number 1 is like all of the initial patchwork solutions, little tweaks here and there, putting on our onboarding website, like we'll reach out to you with more information. And now we've been thinking more about, okay, how do we kind of formalize a lot of those changes and just make those more comprehensive so that people are coming into like a really formalized, structured program. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was great. So look, I'm conscious we run over time here, guys. There's 1 or 2 more questions, but we better move on here. So listen, thanks so much, Brittney, again, for talking to us about this. It was really excellent talk, in my opinion. I think I've gotten a few messages from people with the same sentiments. I thought it was great. And thanks so much to our attendees for joining and tuning in and to hear this today. So as we kind of mentioned earlier, just the second talk in the Optimizing Home Office webinar series. So next week we have Sarah Lynch from Rent the Runway sharing Rent the Runway's journey to remote onboarding during lockdown. So look, that's it, guys. Brittney, thanks a million again. It was really great. And yeah, again, thank you all for joining in.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you so much. One thing I will add is if you do have follow-up questions that I didn't get to, feel free to reach out to me here. I'm happy to schedule a follow-up call or answer them for you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I can send you on anything. I can send you on anything you didn't answer yet today, Brittney. We've got a few more here, so we can touch base anyway, and we can send on. Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Have a great night, guys. Enjoy.
Cheers. Take care. Bye.